This is Rick Levine, and I'm recording the August 2019 astrology forecast from my home office rather than Soul Food Coffee House. I will be off the grid for the entire first week of August, or the last week of July into the first week of August, teaching up at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, a group of about 22 students delving into astrology. Before I jump into the August forecast, I would like to spend a few moments just touching base on a couple of things that are coming up in my world, in the world of teaching and leading workshops in astrology. The first thing I want to mention is the NCGR, that's the National Council for Geocosmic Research. The conference, the NCGR conference in Baltimore on Labor Day weekend, that is August 30th through September 3rd. NCGR is probably best known for its educational program and certification or testing program for various levels of astrological knowledge. This particular conference is All Roads Lead to Baltimore, and I will be teaching there, and I will be giving the banquet address, the keynote talk at this conference also. And if you've heard about the conference online and come to Baltimore, please come up and introduce yourself to me. Let me know that you watch my videos, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you there. The next exciting thing that is happening is the workshop that will be in Bali, that I will be co-facilitating with Caroline Casey. And this is called Pragmatic Mysticism and Applied Divination. And this workshop is going to be November 8th through the 16th in the jungle, in a beautiful retreat center in Bali, near Ubud, Bali. And if you've never been to Bali, it's an amazing experience. Caroline Casey, visionary activist, and me and I will be together co-facilitating this week-long delving into the astromythic proportions and cultivating and animating and manifesting, spiraling forth our gifts that are certainly much needed at this time in our history. And this is be a very exciting week, very fun. And you can find out more about this by going to heavenandearthworkshops.com. And there is a day-by-day curriculum there that will lead you through the week and the planned mischief making and learning for the week. One other thing I'd like to mention is that on Thursday, September 12th, and Saturday, September 14th, I will be up at the Vancouver Fraser Valley Astrological Guild, and they've been doing astrological networking and running astrological educational programs since 1991. And I'll be doing a talk on Thursday night and then an all-day workshop on Saturday. And you can find out more about that by going to the astrologyguild.com, www.astrologyguild.com, and find more information on that workshop there. I'd also like to, before I jump into the August material, just mention in passing that this free video is distributed on YouTube. However, if you want to support my work and help invest in some equipment that can improve the quality of the videos and eventually some outside editorial video editing work, you can go to Patreon, that's Patreon, www.patreon.com/Rick Levine, and find out about a whole array of video astrological teaching that I'm doing, including mid-month updates, and occasional what I call cosmic quickies that are videos on a very wide variety of astrological topics. I offer a monthly chart interpretation class. And for those of you who are more serious about your astrology work, I do have an apprentice program, and you can find out about all of those things on patreon.com/Rick Levine. We're going to start off looking at the chart for July 31st because there was a new moon on July 31st, or there will be, depending upon when you're watching this video. And July 31st new moon is very significant because it's a new moon in Leo. And right now, I say right now, but we're still looking at the July 31st chart. We can see that the sun and the moon are at 8.5 degrees of Leo, and Venus is at 5 degrees of Leo, and Mars is also in Leo later on at 19 degrees of Leo. Now, the important thing to understand about this new moon, and as it sets the tone for the month of August, is that Venus is very closely trine to Chiron, and in fact, the exact trine to Chiron happens on August 1st in the morning. And all times during this video today will be Pacific time, that's Seattle time. But Venus is coming into a trine with Chiron, and over the last few days we've had the sun trining Chiron, and prior to that, a few weeks ago, we had Mars trining Chiron, and all of these offer the potential for healing, the potential for forgiveness. In my mid-month update that I know many of you get who are on the Patreon list, I talked fairly extensively, or a little bit more extensively, about this as an aspect of forgiveness. But it is important that this new moon is a seed that is planted with great intention during the period of Leo, which is heartfelt. The energy is coming out into the open, and yet we also have Mars forming a quincunx to Neptune, which does confuse the energies a little bit. We're now looking at a chart for August 1st. I've simplified the aspects. Prior, I had some additional aspect patterns that I use for both client work and for research work, but we've pulled it back. I've pulled it back so it's just showing the Ptolemaic aspects. The red lines are showing squares and oppositions. The blue lines are showing sextiles and trines, and the green lines are showing quincunxes. And basically, the fatter the line, the closer the aspect is. We've already talked about the Venus trining Chiron, which is exact on August 1st. But the other piece that may even be louder or noisier is the fact that Venus is coming into a square with Uranus that is exact on August 2nd. It's exact early in the morning on August 2nd. But this, in some ways, is a theme that we've seen over the days and even weeks prior, as Mars last month came into Leo and it formed that square with Uranus, and then the Sun just last week formed its square with Uranus, and now Venus is coming into the same into the same place, and in fact, Mercury will also form that square on August 16th. And all of these planets moving through the square to Uranus are all stirring up energy. They're making it so that it's difficult to just relax into the status quo, because Venus, when it squares Uranus, it makes us realize that we like things that maybe we shouldn't like, or maybe that people would judge wrong if they knew that we liked that. We're attracted to people, places, and things that are outside of the box. Now, whether we act on it or not, whether we act on our desires or not is a separate issue. But the fact of the matter is that we could be feeling this cooking toward the beginning of August. And like I said, even through the last week in July as the sun made that square. But by the middle of August, by August 16th, and we'll get there in a few minutes, Mercury, which has pulled all the way back into Cancer. Remember, Mercury was retrograde for almost all of July. It turned retrograde on the 7th, which meant that it was already slowing down in the beginning of July. It moved into Leo, and then it backed up into, it went retrograde, backed up into Cancer. And although Mercury just turned direct on July 31st, within just a few minutes of the new moon on July 31st, Mercury is still lingering back here in Cancer. And yet over the next weeks, Mercury will first enter Leo on August 11th, and then in fact Mercury will square Uranus on August 16th. And so this excitement, this desire for new and different information, thinking out of the box, the unconventionality of our thought process might be come into play by the middle of the month. But coming back to the beginning of the month, it's important to realize now that Mercury is moving direct, and it moves direct all month. It picks up speed pretty quickly. And in fact, that Mercury, which moves into Leo on August 11th, moves into Virgo by the end of the month on August 29th. And so we have Mercury picking up speed. When Mercury is moving its fastest, it only spends a couple of weeks in a sign. It moves almost 2 degrees a day. But Mercury will still be gaining speed through most of this month, but it will whiz through Leo. And as it does, there will be a cluster of planets in Leo. Remember, we already started out with the Mercury, the sun and the moon and Mars all in Leo. The moon moves away pretty quickly, but Mercury comes in behind it. We're just going to move this ahead a few days, and you can see right around there, around August 11th, 12th, Mercury moves into Leo. But that Mercury whizzes through Leo. Right now we have the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all the personal planets, not the moon, in Leo. But the real theme behind the month of August is that each of those planets, the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, one by one will leave Leo, and by the end of the month, they will all be in Virgo. And this is the energetic shift of the month. Unlike many other months, we don't have any major outer planet connections. There are no aspects between Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, one to the other. There are, in fact, aspects from Mars to Pluto and to Uranus, but even those aspects are not, they're not many. See, part of the issue is that when we have all the personal planets, the faster moving planets moving kind of in a cluster, they're not making aspects from one to another. And so it's the aspects that they are making are aspects to the outer planets themselves. And so we actually get some quiet periods. And August, to some extent, is a month of pushing ahead and moving ahead. But because the planets one at a time move into Virgo, we get this sense at the beginning of the month where it's like something's happened. There's this opening. There's a sense that of boldness, of creativity, of heartfelt expression that goes along with Leo. We want to express our love for others, and we want to feel that love coming back to us. This is an important piece of the energy of the planets moving through Leo. The difference between Leo energy and Virgo energy is significant because Leo is a fire sign and it's expressive. The sun is the planet, the astrological planet related to Leo, and the energy is constant, it's fixed, it's noble. The sun relates to gold. Gold is gold doesn't play well with others, but it's beautiful on its own, meaning that there's not a lot of interaction. The sun is so strong and so outgoing in its manifestation, is that it stands alone. It's able to hold its own position, if you will. Virgo, on the other hand, is an earth sign, not fire like Leo. It's more practical, but it's interesting because Virgo, I think, is the least earthy of the three earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And I say it's the least earthy because it's ruled by or related to the planet Mercury, which is logical, and that's not earthy. Although Mercury, when it's related to Gemini, is air. It's just thought. When it's related to Virgo, Mercury has to do with practical thought. So it still has an earth component. There's still the sense of Virgo is sensible and practical, and it's not so much interested in just creative thinking as it is in thinking that is analytical and rational, logical and useful. I think the key word for Virgo is useful. We sometimes call Virgo the sign of the critic, but it's really the ability to discriminate what's useful and what's not. Think of the symbol of Virgo, the maiden holding the wheat, the bundle of wheat, and she is separating the actual pulse, the usable part of the grain of the wheat, and putting that one place, and then taking the stalk, the chaff, and putting it somewhere else. So that this process of separating the wheat from the chaff, that which is useful from that which is not, that's the Virgo function. It's actually the binary function of the universe. Gemini is not binary. Gemini, well, I mean, it's mutual. There's two with the Mercury and Gemini, but Gemini just wants to connect anything with anything. And there's no decision. If it's there, Mercury and Gemini wants to connect with it. But Mercury related to Virgo and the sign of Virgo itself is not interested in just making connections. It's interested in discriminating what is useful and connecting with that. And that which is not useful, boom, it's yes, no. It's the binary 0-1. It's that decision of okay, not okay. This is good, this is not good. I keep this, I throw this away. That's what that, and even the virgin, who in modern culture is a woman who's never had sex, in the Greek, in the historic version of the meaning of the word Virgo, it's really a woman who was not owned, a woman who was not property. And a woman who was not property, like the temple priestesses or the prostitutes, they were not property of a male. And what that meant is that they could say no. You see, a woman historically, and although we have come a long way, we have a long way to go yet. But historically, a woman was the property of the man who owned her, her husband or her father. And as such, the woman had no right of refusal. The woman could not say no because she was a subject. She was responsible to her owner to do what she was told to do. On the other hand, a priestess and a prostitute were able to go, no, you're okay, you're not okay. There were the Eleusinian mysteries that were an initiation process, but a man could not ask or demand a priestess to bring this initiation to the man. And these initiation rites involved the use of a psychedelic like substance and very powerful and transformational and healing sexual rites. But the priestess had to initiate the action. In other words, there was this ability to go, this is okay, this is not okay. And again, that's what Virgo is all about. So as we look at the planets this month, moving from Leo into Virgo, we get a real sense of the month. Now, the first part of the month, especially after the 11th, when Mercury moves into Leo, the first part of the month, we have all the personal planets, as I said earlier, in Leo. And as we move this ahead a day at a time, we can see that Mars was so far ahead of the pack that Mars moves a little slower now, but Mars is the first planet to escape from Leo. And we have Mars going from a fire sign into a practical earth sign. And Mars can be very detail oriented in Virgo, very Mars needs to know that everything is in order and all the information is precise and everything makes sense. Mars is like how you drive your car. It's like how you drive your car of life, how you move your body. And in Leo, Mars knew where it was going and it was just going to get there. It was ready to go. Bold, brash, direct, dramatic. In Virgo, Mars is much more cautious. Mars is not in a hurry to get there if it means that it's going to make a mistake along the way. Mars in Virgo wants to move in a manner that has correctness, precision, effectiveness, efficiency. And Mars is the first planet on August 17th that moves from Leo into Virgo, actually late at night on the West Coast. So really the 18th is the first day that Mars is fully in Virgo. But it's followed pretty quickly by Venus, which is moving a little faster. And what's going to happen is Venus is going to move into Virgo actually on the 21st. And there we see it right there. But Venus has her eyes on Mars. And remember, Venus and Mars are the cosmic lovers. Venus was Mars's consort. And Venus and Mars actually form a conjunction when Venus catches up to Mars on August 24th in Virgo. So we have now Venus in Virgo. Now Venus in Leo was ready to reveal her stuff, to love big, to love brightly, to put her feelings, her emotions, her inclinations, her desires right out in the open. Venus gets to Virgo, and again, she becomes more cautious. She wants not to have a brilliant love experience. She wants to have the right love experience. And so Venus in Virgo often is the list maker who says, in order to be intimate, in order to even like an idea or a person, to want to pursue something, Venus needs to have the list. This is again, it's the ability to rationalize or analyze what's okay, what's not okay. So Venus says, I want this in a relationship or in a partnership or in a school that I'm going to attend or an educational program. I want this. This is a showstopper. This is a showstopper. Venus makes her lists. And then when something happens, it gets compared to what's okay, what's not okay. And then Venus decides whether to go ahead or not. Now, right behind that, by August 23rd, we have the sun moving from Leo into Virgo on August 23rd. So we now have Mars and Venus and the sun in Virgo. And in fact, the Venus and the sun are both moving faster than Mars. So what happens is that the sun and Venus will both eventually catch up with Mars. So Venus is moving faster right now, and Venus actually joins up with Mars on the 24th, just a day later. We can see there it is right there. You can see how she goes across Mars, and now Venus is ahead of Mars, and Venus will separate from the pack. Meanwhile, the sun is moving faster than Mars, not faster than Venus, though. The sun is moving faster than Mars, and the sun will actually catch up with Mars, but not until, let's just do this. There's the sun right there, but not until the beginning of September does the sun catch up with Mars. Now, you can see during this whole time, we now have 4 planets in Virgo, and it's really not until later in September do the planets that begin to move from Virgo into Libra. So the point here is that the first part of, we're going to go back. So the point here is that the first part of the month is really a study of Leo. The energy is out there. It's bright. It's midsummer. It's brilliant. And here we are on August 11th, 12th. We have the 4 planets in Leo. The other thing that we did skip over that I want to touch base on, a couple of other things, is that as these planets have moved through Leo, we have both the Sun and Venus making trines to Jupiter. Let's back this up even one more day. Here the Sun, now Mars has already been through this. This happened in July, but now we have the Sun at 13 degrees and now 14 degrees, making a trine with Jupiter. And then when the sun reaches 15 degrees, it then makes a quincunx with Saturn. And in fact, as it continues, it then makes a quincunx with Neptune, right around there. The quincunx to Neptune is on August 10th. What's interesting is that same pattern is then followed by Venus. So we have the sun, and I'll talk about what this means in just a moment, but first I want to set it up. We have the sun making a trine to Jupiter, which is expansive and big, and the energy here is powerfully optimistic. But it's followed just a couple days later. So the sun makes the trine to Jupiter on August 7th, and it's followed by the quincunx to Saturn almost right away. It's actually still on the 7th, but by the 8th, it's past it. And that quincunx to Jupiter is a readjustment. The quincunx to Saturn is a readjustment. So the sun's trine to Jupiter goes whoosh. It's like big, heartfelt, express, optimistic, outgoing. It's even risk-taking, because that Jupiter in Sagittarius has an idea that's a big, bold idea, something far away, adventurous, and it wants to go there. And the sun fills into that trine and says, "Yup, let's do it." But almost immediately, the sun runs into the quincunx with Saturn, and Saturn, remember, is still very close to the nodal axis, the south node. And as the sun hits the quincunx to those points, all of a sudden, almost immediately, it's like, but I can't do it. I can't do it because of this. I don't have the credentials. I don't have the money. Dad says no. It's against the law. Whatever that Saturnian reason is, that sits right behind it. And then by the 10th, the sun is actually forming that quincunx to Neptune, and it's basically not as clear. These planets all coming through this point here creates a pattern that's called a yad, which is a sextile between 2 planets. Here the sextile is between Saturn, South Node, Pluto, and Neptune. And in fact, that Neptune is right at the middle point between Saturn and Pluto. If you were to figure out where that halfway point is between Saturn and Pluto, it would be at about 18 degrees of Capricorn, which is exactly, or same degree number, it's partile, sextile to Neptune. So as each of these planets come through, first the trine to Jupiter, then the quincunx to Saturn, and then the quincunx to Neptune, and then the quincunx to Pluto, it's like there's this feeling of uneasy, something's not right. I call the quincunx the mosquito in the tent. It's like you can't find it to kill it, and it doesn't leave, but it buzzes at all the wrong moments. You're falling asleep, and all of a sudden you hear that, and you kind of want to get rid of it, but you can't find it to actually get rid of it. And so this becomes a theme of the first part of the month, with all this energy and outgoing Leo and dramatic, proud Leo. We know who we are. We know what we want to do. We know where we want to go. And yet these quincunxes kind of can be confusing and irritating because there's something in the way, Saturn. It's kind of confusing and it's hard to figure out what it is that's in the way or how to get rid of it or go around it. And then those planets will also form the quincunx to Pluto, which basically says, yeah, well, whatever it is that's in the way is incredibly powerful, and it's not just a wall. It may be an entire institution. It's more complicated than just something that's in the way. So the timing here is that the sun is the first of the planets to go through this trine to Jupiter optimism, quincunx to Saturn, problem with authority or not being able to go forward until the pieces are in order. The I'm not sure, the quincunx to Neptune, and then the dealing with the larger and deeper issue, and that would be the quincunx to Pluto. The sun's quincunx to Pluto, by the way, is on August 13th. And that's going to become important because remember, Venus is moving faster than the sun now, and Venus is catching up to the sun. And so what's happening here is that first the sun goes through this process of, gee, everything's great. Whoops, maybe it's not so great. There's irritations to work out. And right behind it, we have Venus, let's back this up a little bit, making the same trine to Jupiter. And the Venus trine to Jupiter is on August 8th, a day after the sun's trine. And then as we move that along, Venus then forms the quincunx to Saturn on the 9th. There it is right there, 15 to 15. And then we continue to move that along, and Venus then forms the quincunx to Neptune by the 11th. There it is right there, 1818. Now she's very close to the sun. The sun makes that quincunx just the day earlier, but Venus is catching up to the sun, and boom, Venus actually aligns with the sun on the 13th. They're at the same degree now, same degree. And they're both coming into that quincunx with Pluto, and they both hit that later in the day, in the evening, at actually late night, where the sun is exactly conjunct Venus at the same degree and same minute that they are both quincunx to Pluto. And if we were to put the exact time in there, we could actually take this up, we could move this forward an hour at a time, and you can see how there they are at 11 p.m. There they are at 21 degrees 11 minutes. The Venus conjuncting the sun, a connection between our desires, our heartfelt center, the what we like, the what we don't like, the explaining of what our feelings are out in the open, the revelation, the brightness, the healing that's involved with that as it lines up with the gold of Leo, the sun. This is the heart of gold. However, the heart of gold at 21 degrees Leo, 11 minutes is exactly nailed to a quincunx to retrograde Pluto at 21 degrees Capricorn and 11 minutes. This is astounding how exactly close this is. And the other significant thing here is that we are coming into a full moon, which kind of exacerbates this even more. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this whole piece here of this, these planets each kind of teasing us with this optimistic, magical, perfect, big thinking, big idea, grandiosity, everything is okay, let's just go, let's get on the airplane and take a trip, let's enroll in the PhD program, let's take something as far as we can. whoops, we can't. And whoops, now it's complicated. And this whole process can be quite transformational. Now, during the same period of time, we've also had Mercury sneak into Leo. I mentioned this earlier. Oh, let's go back and do this so it's a day at a time. And you can see back here that, oh, there we are right there, that Mercury actually on August 11th, late in the day, Mercury moves from Cancer into Leo. And so this energy wants to move outward. And this is a very important piece of all of this. But the other thing is that we're coming into the full moon in Aquarius. Here we have the chart for the Aquarius full moon. That's at 5:29 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Adjust your time zones accordingly. And this, again, the significant piece here is that this full moon is obviously opposed the sun, because that's what a full moon is. 22 degrees Leo, 24 minutes, 22 degrees Aquarius, 24 minutes. But Venus is still very close to the sun at 22 degrees 45 minutes, less than a half a degree, actually about a quarter of a degree away from the sun. And so this full moon in Aquarius is interesting because Leo represents the sun, the heart center. It's the love that says, I love you. It's a personal, individualized, playful, even romantic love that involves personality. Aquarius, on the other hand, is as far away from Leo as it can get. Remember, this is, in traditional astrology, this is ruled by Saturn. In modern astrology, we bring Uranus into the mix, but both Saturn and Uranus are colder. They're farther away from the individual. And the moon in Aquarius is arguably the least of the emotional. The moon in Leo is arguably the least emotional position for the moon, meaning that the Leo moon, the Aquarius moon, it's not that there are no emotions. Obviously, there are emotions, there are feelings, but feelings are based upon ideas and concepts, and Aquarius is a depersonalized sign. I mean, it's about sociability, it's about friendliness. Aquarius is the sign of humanity, but it's not the sign of the individual humans in it. It's the group consciousness. And so here we have the full moon in Aquarius that's making us feel like we want to connect and be part of the group. And yet the Venus conjuncting the sun is not willing to let go of its needs, of its desires, of its heartfelt desire to connect on a one-to-one personal basis. And so this is a very interesting dilemma that this full moon presents. And we also have another piece of this, and that is, into this we have Mercury coming in to a trine with Chiron and a square with Uranus. Now remember, we started off the month with Venus in this position, and we had the sun in this position at the last week of July. But now we have Mercury saying, yeah, well, you know what? This whole dilemma of the personal versus the conceptual love, the agape, the L-O-V-E, the big love, the personal love compared to that, which may be a dilemma. Actually now with Mercury forming this trine to Chiron, and that trine to Chiron is actually exact within a half a day, so it's very, very close of the full moon itself. And that Mercury trine Chiron basically says those wounds, those hurts, those feelings of isolation, of separation, the retrospective the replaying of old situations where we feel like I could have done more, I should have done more. Whether we're being hard on ourselves or hard on someone else, that Mercury trine Chiron is an ability to talk about it. It's an ability to bring it out into the open and through communication, again, to heal those wounds. However, Mercury is also coming into a square to Uranus that is exact on the 16th, the following day. And there are consequences for what we say. We may end up being not alone, but there may be a bit of separateness. In other words, even though healing occurs, there's this Mercury square Uranus says, I'm willing to take a risk by saying something that doesn't fit in, that's unconventional, that may create a separation. But Mercury square Uranus is also very high frequency, electric. It's brilliant. It's innovative. These are new ideas, fresh ideas. This is an exciting period of time. And then we have Mars, which here on the 16th is just coming up to the fixed star Regulus at 29 degrees Leo, or actually it's now at 0 degrees of Virgo. And Mars moves from Leo into Virgo. And we talked about this earlier. This is the first planet that escapes on into Virgo. And again, I've taken the aspects to the moon off just because the moon moves so quickly, and it makes so many aspects that those lines can be distracting from the deeper picture that we're trying to touch here as we look at the month ahead. But now on August 18th, we're past the full moon, and Mars has moved on into Virgo, kind of being the scout, the forerunner of all the other planets that will move into Virgo. Mars moves into Virgo, followed by Venus and the Sun, and eventually Mercury. But in the meantime, we now have Mercury by the 21st, as we move this ahead, that Mercury, because Mercury is moving so fast now, Mercury makes a trine to Jupiter. Venus jumps into Virgo, and Mercury now is repeating the pattern that Venus and the Sun made, where Mercury's trine to Jupiter says everything looks great. It's easy to talk an optimistic game. It's easy to see the positive in things, and yet no sooner do we do that than we also have this quincunx to Saturn that kind of is holding us back. Again, there's a restriction. We see what the problems are, but we want to break through them anyhow. And then over the next couple of days, that Mercury will make the quincunx to Neptune, and then the quincunx by the 24th to Pluto. And so there's this replay of this irritating factor of, even though everything's moving into Virgo, Virgo's ruling planet Mercury is still hanging back in Leo, trying to still say everything in a way that works, and yet it doesn't. It runs into that frustrating problem. Over the days ahead, we have the Sun on the 23rd, which moves into Virgo. Boom. Now we have the Sun, Venus, and Mars all in Virgo. And on the 24th, Venus catches up to Mars. We talked about this earlier. This is, it won't show until the 25th, but this is at noon. Venus moving faster than Mars is just 7 minutes of orb away from being exact there. And then that Venus now lines up with Mars. But remember, when Venus was lining up with the Sun, it was quincunxing Pluto. Now Venus is lining up with Mars, and it's quincunxing Chiron. And now maybe we have that old wound that isn't going away as quickly. There's something here that is gnawing at us, and this can be a bit problematic. Although the Venus conjuncting Mars, basically, this, like I said earlier, these are the cosmic lovers. And in Virgo, they're running a fine game. In other words, they know why they are together. And if they can get all the details in order, boy, they can make hay while the sun shines. We also have the sun coming into that mix, and the sun will catch up with Mars we already looked at that, but not until September, because the sun and Mars are moving at a fairly constant clip at a similar rate right now. But we do have that Mercury. We're now on the 25th, and we have Venus, which on the 25th, early on the day, makes a quincunx with Chiron, and Mars comes into that same quincunx, and then so does the Sun. The Mars hits it on the 25th, the same day. The Sun hits it on the 28th. And then Mercury actually then catches up. Mercury moves into Virgo on the 29th, and by the 31st, Mercury is making that quincunx to Chiron. All of these planets, quincunx and Chiron, are all about the forgiveness that we wish we could give or receive, but it doesn't quite happen. And yet there is a grace to this, because in each of these cases, as each of these planets first makes the quincunx to Chiron, it's followed up very quickly by a trine to Uranus. And the timing on that is that Venus makes that trine to Uranus on the 26th. Venus makes the trine to Uranus on the 26th. Mars makes the trine to Uranus on the 28th. And then the Sun makes the trine to Uranus actually it's on the 29th. It looks like here it's closer on the 30th, because it happens in the evening on the 29th. The Sun making that trine to Uranus. Now, in each of these cases, those things which have irritated us, those things which have bothered us, are now kind of breaking through. And this is a pretty magical breakthrough period of time, because when each of these planets is trining Uranus, it's almost like the changes we were trying to make when they were each squaring Uranus last month and at the beginning of this month, beginning of August. Now those changes are happening, and it's almost like we don't have to do anything about it. They're happening with great ease. It's almost like it's easy to make those changes that we were trying to make before. Now, we did breeze over one thing here that we need to move back to, and that is earlier on the 30th, we have the moon, which, let's back this up a little bit. The moon, late in the afternoon on the 29th, the moon moves from Leo into Virgo. The moon joins up with Mercury. Late afternoon, early evening on the 29th. And then that moon catches up to the sun. It's at 3:37 a.m., 3:37 a.m. on the morning of August 30th. We have both the moon and the sun at 6 degrees of Virgo. 6 degrees of Virgo, and look at Uranus at 6 degrees of Taurus. Now, we have here an interesting, kind of like a grand trine, but the Uranus piece of this is wide. What I mean by that, although this line is there, it's thin, because the Uranus trine to Saturn is 8 degrees. 6 and 8 are 14. 6 and 8 are 14. It's a little bit less than 8 degrees from Uranus to Saturn. That trine was more exact. It's now waning. But we have Venus at 11 coming into a trine to Saturn. That's not exact until September. We have Mars at 7 coming into the same trine. We have the moon at 6, which at 6 degrees, and the sun, the sun will hit that trine in just a week. and then the moon will hit that trine in just but within the day, by tomorrow, and Mercury will hit that trine to Saturn in the next couple of days. And so what we have here is kind of this self-sufficiency in practical energy. This is a huge Virgo statement. This is the seed period for the intense focus, perfectionism, practical, analytical, narrow-minded even, but in narrow-minded thinking, one can open up the entire universe. It's the William Blake line that to see the universe in a grain of sand. There's that focus of everything is contained in the minute particulars here, especially because this new moon is trine Uranus, and this is explosively awakening. This is magical. This is powerful. This is a wide open new moon, even though it's in Virgo. It's past the quincunx to Chiron, even though Mercury is still coming into it. This basically has a huge amount of potential if, and only if, we use our intention in a very narrow and practical manner. That's the magic of Virgo. It's not being scattered. It's not being all over the place. In fact, all of these planets moving through Virgo will, over the beginning of September, the moon over the next couple of days, over the next day, but all these planets through the beginning of September will one by one also square Jupiter and oppose Neptune. And this is basically pitting the focus and the narrowness, the specificity, the laser-like, critical energy of Virgo. And it's making it a bit crazy because Jupiter is saying, go for the big. Virgo saying, go for the little. And so there's a bit of a conflict here, but I don't think that's inherent in the new moon itself. The new moon says, focus, state your intention, and be very specific with it. And then as it grows into something maybe too big, you can always pull it back later on. So that's the month of August. It's quite an interesting dichotomy, because we go from all these planets in Leo to all these planets in Virgo. I mean, with the new moon in Virgo, we have all five personal planets, if you will, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all clustered within 9 degrees of orb in literally the first third of the sign of Virgo. They're clustered within a third of the sign. And so this is very, very, very focused and very, very powerful. And yet it's getting the play of that trine to Uranus, which really explodes things and opens things up. One other piece of the month of August is the fact that that we have a couple of planets that are turning, that are stationing. Obviously, Mercury just stationed direct on the last day of July, and Mercury won't go retrograde again until Halloween. We have a Halloween day, an October 31st stationary retrograde Mercury. But right now, Mercury is free. I mean, it's running forward and it's aiming at its own ruling sign, or the sign it rules. Its secondary sign, Gemini, being the first sign. But Mercury is direct, running through Virgo, and we'll talk more about that next month. We also have on August 11th, we have Jupiter, which had been retrograde. Jupiter retrograded all the way back to 14.5 degrees of Sagittarius. And now Jupiter is turning direct, and Jupiter then makes a very quick run through September, October, November, and by December is on into Capricorn. And then we also have Uranus, which has been moving direct It turns retrograde on August 11th. August 11th is a bit of a handing off of the baton, because on August 11th, Jupiter turns direct and Uranus turns retrograde. I don't notice a huge shift when planets out past Mars station. I do notice it if they're making aspects in your chart, but I don't necessarily notice it as much if they're just out there. The important thing, though, is that as Jupiter turns direct, I think we'll see the big picture, which has been a bit tied up in this kind of going back into the past. Maybe we'll see some of this play out politically, but when Jupiter turns direct by September, October, November, we're moving into new territory again. There's no holding back. We're going ahead, and in fact, Saturn, which has been retrograde also, and Pluto, Saturn turns direct in September, and Pluto turns direct the very beginning of October. So we're seeing these outer planets here, the Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, which had all been retrograde, are all now moving forward, and I think that'll make tremendous gains. Meanwhile, Uranus, the planet of innovation, is doing its own dance, going the opposite way and pulling in retrograde. And as long as we're talking about retrograde direct, we also have Chiron, which has been retrograde, and it went retrograde the beginning of July, and it doesn't turn direct until mid-December, and it backs all the way up to 1.5 degrees of Aries, but it does not move back into Pisces. So in summary, I think here the important thing about this month is that there's no interplanet retrogrades. There are no eclipses. The planets are moving forward, and they move forward quite powerfully and boldly and almost without reservation. And yet there is a reservation. There's those damn quincunxes that don't let us run away with ourselves. And then as the planets begin to cluster in the second half of the month in Virgo, the energy becomes more focused, and I think we make a more realistic game plan rather than just pushing our way forward. We're now actually creating a plan in order to get to where we want to get to. So that's the story of the month. It's an interesting month, a bit of a different flavor than the few months prior, and we'll see how it plays out for those of you who get the mid-month updates for $3 a month through Patreon. I will see you mid-month. And the rest of you, I will be back at Soul Food Bookstore, on Soul Food Coffee House, on the last Wednesday of the month in August to do the September forecast. Remember, think cosmically. It's okay to go out to the outer edges of the universe, but you have to apply things locally. Think cosmically, act locally. I'm Rick Levine.